Congressman Curt Weldon was Vice Chairman of the House Armed Services Committee and simultaneously Vice Chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee. As such, he was a senior member on the two most important committees in Congress dealing with national security issues. Congressman Weldon held the first unclassified congressional hearings on the EMP threat, and with Congressman Bartlett, he established the EMP Commission. Congressional hearings on nuclear terrorism and nuclear suitcase bombs conducted by Congressman Weldon led to the Homeland Security programs to protect U.S. ports and cities from smuggled nuclear weapons and also from biological terrorism. Congressman Weldon served as a fire chief and lost many friends among the New York City Fire Department in the 9/11 attacks.
Imagine, if you will, with no forewarning, that your automobile stops on the highway. Every automobile stops on the highway at the same time. Your electric power grid goes down. Telecommunications shuts down. Air traffic control comes to be ceased. Every possible means of communication, every support mechanism for the vital functions of systems at our hospitals and medical centers, all shut down at the exact same time, throwing America into the dark ages. Hypothetical? Well, let's go back to June 12, 1962. The first time that we're aware of that our military openly conducted a test studying the effects of EMP. Starfish Prime, out in the atolls off of Hawaii. The result astounded our military planners because it just didn't do what they thought would happen. It affected our satellites, and at that time we had relatively few satellites in outer space, but a major portion of those satellites were silenced. It caused problems on the ground that people at that time did not clearly understand the reasons why they were occurring. That was an EMP incident. And it was being done because our military understood what the Soviet military planners understood. The strategic nuclear doctrine of both countries during the Cold War was called MAD, Mutually Assured Deterrence, or as some refer to, Mutually Assured Destruction. You attack us and we'll wipe you out. And so our long-range ICBMs were pointed at each other. But in each case, in each country, the first wave of nuclear launches were not designed to kill people. They were designed to produce an EMP. The Soviets understood the same thing that we did. If we're going to have a war, we're going to dumb down their country first. We're going to shut down all of their systems from the air, and then we'll do what we have to do to lead the attack. So our militaries during the Cold War clearly understood EMP. The problem was that our military thought that this could never be advanced to other nations and could never be taken to those that might want to cause us harm. Wrong. Over the past 30 years, EMP has been studied by the militaries of China. In fact, I'm probably the only American official who's been invited to guest lecture twice at the National Defense University of the PLA in Beijing. And on my second visit, I had a chance to interact with mid-level career officers that were rising up in the Chinese military. And at that time, they had just stood up a whole directorate focusing on cyber warfare, on the capabilities of using the one advantage that industrial nations have, that give us our smart weapons. Our smart weapons aren't smart because they think for themselves. Our smart weapons are smart because they have the linkages to IT systems that give us that competitive advantage that no one can overcome. And let's think for a moment. If you're Iran, if you're Syria, if you're North Korea, if you're Venezuela, you're never going to match America tank for tank, plane for plane. It can't happen. So what then would you look to do? Well, you want to take away that one initiative that gives our smart weapons their smartness. And that is the linkages of our communication and IT systems. And if you can take that away, then our weapons are no better than any weapon that any other nation on the face of the earth has. Well, that's what an EMP can do, and that's what our adversaries clearly understand. Now, don't let those who argue against EMP tell you that we're trying to create a scare scenario. That is totally untrue. As we hear those pundits in America talk about the threat of loose nukes, well, duh. Back in the 1990s, I was the one who chaired a whole series of hearings, bringing over Dr. Christopher Andrew and Oleg Gordievsky, the highest-ranking GRU defector, to testify before the U.S. Congress on what they know to be threats, involving loose nuclear weapons and capability. I was the one who brought in Stanislav Lunev and had to put a mask over his head to testify before Congress on what he knew when he was working at the Russian embassy, the Soviet embassy in Washington, but was really an undercover agent for their security services. I was the one who brought over Alexei Yablokov, the chairman of the Yablokov Commission in Moscow, who was the first to acknowledge that the Soviets had been dumping their nuclear submarines off of their coast, damaging and threatening the security of the ocean environment. We were in the forefront of those issues then, and we're not going to take a backseat to anyone today who tells us that EMP is not a concern. It's the concern of the loose nukes. We know that, and we work those issues hard. And it is important that America prepare for those kinds of situations, like the possibility of a dirty bomb, or like the possibility of other type of weapons of mass destruction. But that does not in any way undermine the seriousness of EMP.